You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
I knew it, man. Last week I said, I was like, he's about to drop. The thing that we have in common with Joe Biden is that none of us will remember that he was president. They're just not doing democracy this season. We're just supposed to not even talk about it.
He is. I think it shows that he can put his country before his ego.
They had this rebrand ready to go.
Charlie XCX posted on Twitter, Kamala is brat.
I can't stop talking about the context that I exist in. The greater context. I can't.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the pod. Brandon's internet is once again chaos, disaster, apocalypse. He is melting down right now in Los Angeles, will not be able to join us. But we've got our good friend Riley with us today. We've got John Coogan coming up in a few minutes. In a little bit, we're going to be doing our Polymarket segment, checking out the betting markets on Kamala's odds, let's say, of victory. And I think the really interesting one that we're going to have some interesting conversation about is the question of whether or not Biden will finish this term, which, I don't know, we can get into in a minute. A lot of great stuff today. Crowdstrike, obviously have to talk about it. But first, before all of that, I knew it, man. Last week I said, I was like, he's about to drop. And I think that's going to be the thing that we're talking about next week. Next week, it's going to be absolute bananas because my gut is that Biden's going to step down. But now, the nature of the internet in this insane election as it is, there are a lot of things to talk about this week. One of them is the fact that President Biden dropped from the race, and he did this on Sunday. The kind of response today has been something along the lines of, I mean, it depends on who you are, right? It depends on if you were voting for Trump or if you were not voting for Trump. And if you weren't voting for Trump, Joe Biden went from dangerously brain-addled, a person who maybe had to have the 25th Amendment invoked so we could get him out of office and run somebody else against Trump, to one of the greatest presidents in history. Literally, this has been said by many, many people online. The one that comes to mind, though, that just really, Sunny Hostin saying this on The View. Okay, all the View ladies, obviously. I love The View. I've never loved it as much as I did when Meghan McCain was on.
You're for decriminalizing border crossings. You're one of the people that raised their hands at the debate. Do you agree with AOC that we should get rid of DHS altogether?
That is not correct.
You guys got to go back and watch some of those old clips. That was a woman who really just held their feet to the fire, didn't care. People would boo her. She did not give a shit. They don't have that anymore. I saw all talking heads who agree. So they're all going around talking about how awesome Biden was and what a great man for dropping and blah, blah, blah. Sunny says he's going to be remembered as the best. He will be remembered, she used that word, as the greatest, one of the greatest presidents in American history. And I'm thinking like Lincoln or something.
I think it shows what a statesman he is. I think it shows what a patriot he is. I think it shows that he can put his country before his ego because he had such a great record as president. I think that history will note him as one of the greatest presidents that we've had.
The thing that we have in common with Joe Biden is that none of us will remember that he was president, okay? That's the thing that we all have in common. But with Sanjana, what you mentioned, and I also noted as it was happening, I think I might have mentioned on Twitter, I'm not sure, maybe one of our takes, the news dropped on X. Whoever is on Biden's team running his social media account shared it to X first, not even just social media. Because I actually went back and looked at I looked at the times, and X was the very first one. After that was Instagram and Meta. There was no leak to the press. There was no special scoop from the New York Times. There was no interview. In fact, he vanished for a few days, which was also very strange. Part of this, I think, is fueled just by the fact that, I mean, listen, Joe is old and he's now angry, and he's like, the whole entire media establishment rose up along with my fellow Democrats to do a coup, a sort of political, let's not call it a coup. It was kind of a coup, but let's an uprising, a mini revolution, an unseating here's what we know. What we know is that Kamala Harris, after just like 2 days, is now somehow the new Democratic nominee for president. And there was no vote. There was no primary. She's just running, and we're now accepting that. And Joe's not. I think he's mad, and I think he doesn't really care. I think part of that's this. He's like, fuck it, I'm going to X, or do it on X. I don't care. Maybe even his social media team is also sufficiently mad that they're doing this. Certainly the team around him is mad, because who else are they going to go and work for? They've been with Biden forever. I think it's not really clear what they're going to be doing in their careers now. So I think there's probably a lot of bitterness there, especially targeted towards Team Kamala. And they didn't really care. But part of it is also the fact that X is just undeniably a very important platform for this kind of discussion, for going direct to your audience, to your fans, for just announcing something. I believe it was Olivia Nuzzi who said, he just tweeted it. and he did. Sanj, what do you make of this?
I mean, I thought it was insane that his senior advisors didn't find out. They found out a minute before the tweet went live. And I do think, like, you know, the coup speculation, like whether or not this was actually some kind of like Nancy Pelosi driven sort of backdoor maneuver to force Biden's hand. Again, I don't think it's unfounded. I don't know if it actually happened, and I personally, you know, don't have strongly held opinions on it, but I don't think it's unfounded because of how it happened on X, and because, like, Pelosi, I think, was interviewed in the Times did a profile of her actually a few days before Biden announced he was not going to pursue the nomination, and sort of highlighted that, you know, Pelosi has been such a kind of power broker in the Democratic Party for decades, and brought up once again how cagey she had been in interviews in the weeks leading up to Biden dropping out, when she said, you know, Biden can make up his mind. And then, you know, the talk show host was like, well, he has made up his mind. And then she was like, no, he can make his own decision.
I want him to do whatever he decides to do. And that's the way it is.
Honestly, I felt kind of sad for Biden when I watched his Oval Office address, where he talked about, like, he said something sort of suggestive when he was talking about how he needs to put his personal ambition aside and do what's best for the country. And you really got the sense that, like, he's pissed from that speech.
It was strange for him to reveal his own pride.
Yeah.
Like, why would he say that? I don't, and rather than just be like, listen, I did some soul searching, and I realized that I don't have it in me. And I'm not going to be the best president for you guys. He reiterated, he was like, I think I would be the best person. Like, he said something like, you know, something along the lines of, I think I'd be the best person to do the job, which is like not necessarily a glowing endorsement of Kamala. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it again, it's this kind of thing where it just gives fodder to the kind of, you can't blame people for, you know, having conspiracy theories about whether or not there was a coup when it was done in such a bizarre, opaque way, and then Biden didn't appear for a few days later. I mean, it's sort of, you know, I just don't even know what the other read is. I mean, what do we think happened here other than a democratic revolution internally? What is the non-conspiracy theory that Biden just did some soul searching and was like, actually, you know what? I finally remembered that I have dementia, and so I'm dropping, and it had nothing to do with what anybody said. It's like, obviously what happened was they forced him out. Yeah. And I don't think it was necessarily stupid of them. Just tactically speaking, it makes a lot of sense. Certainly it's hypocritical because of the Democratic Party, and they're, I guess, not doing democracy this season. But that is, yeah, it's just like, it's very weird to call something like that a, quote, dangerous. It's a dangerous question to ask when you're asking whether or not there was a conspiracy to unseat him. And what does a conspiracy mean? That means like Nancy Pelosi talking to Barack Obama and saying, hey, he has dementia. He is not going to beat Trump. If he doesn't beat Trump, everybody down ticket is going to be fucked. How do we stop that total disaster for the Democratic Party? And they were like, here's what we got to do. We got to get him out, and we got to get in, I guess, Kamala, because she can use his money.
We need you to be Mamala of the country.
And then they orchestrate whatever they need to orchestrate to make that happen, including, I think, encouraging him to push the debate up. for all sorts of stupid reasons. I'm sure they were like, listen, this is going to prove to the world that you can do it. And, or it could have been hardball. Listen, if you can't do it, we're not going to give you money, or we're going to force a primary. So you have to force the thing up. Like, who knows what it was? Certainly what I know is that happened. They had those conversations behind the scenes. They orchestrated in every way they possibly could, including leaks to the press. Where did all that information come over the last couple of weeks about Biden's ongoing mental deterioration? Like, that is coming from the DNC, putting on a pressure campaign to get him out after doing a lot of orchestration. And I think it's really, 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 it's crazy because, Paul Graham went after Balaji for being irresponsible, he said, for suggesting that this happened. I think it was really irresponsible for him to go after someone for something so obviously true. And not even because I think it's, dangerous for people to read it. I think for him, and we're going to talk about this later, but I think that he's just kind of constantly owning himself right now in a way that's really embarrassing and he's not going to recover from. But I want to get off that because we're going to get back to the battle of the billionaires later. Riley, what are you thinking about the Coconut Queen, Team Coconut? Are you in it? Are you feeling the context? Like, where are we right now?
Well, one thing that is very surprising to me about Team Coconut is just how quick they had this rebrand ready to go. Like, it was instantaneous. And so that sort of like leads me to believe like either one, this hot swap was in the works for Democrats longer than they would have us like lead us to believe. Or two, there were just like a bunch of bored interns like at the DNC just like hating their lives, having to post about malarkey and like dark Brandon, just like daydreaming, like, please let this old guy drop out so I can post my brat memes.
What is going on with the brat thing? What is the genesis of that? Did you guys follow that at all? Like, how that came together? It. What? Tell me everything about the brat thing that's happening.
Well, I would preface this by saying I'm a Charlie XCX fan. I doubt many of our listeners are, but
I love that red one, the 2017 album.
Yeah. So Charlie XCX has a new album, Brat, that came out, and it's a little bit unfortunate that it's now become, I think, so associated with mainstream politics. But basically, from what I saw, and I don't know if this is actually Genesis, someone posted a TikTok on. It was like right after Biden announced. I mean, it was maybe like an hour or so afterward, which was like sort of a spliced together series of clips of Kamala saying like her sort of catchphrases where,
you think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
You exist in the context of all that became before you, the coconut tree thing, her dancing with those kids, which is a great clip. And they spliced it over Von Dutch by Charlie XCX. And it's just this very funny, like kind of ridiculous clip, which I think included like text saying Kamala is brat in the Charlie XCX font. And then shortly thereafter, Charlie XCX, who's British, I don't know what the fuck she has to do with any of this, but she's just this like British chick who hangs out with gay dudes, posted on Twitter like, Kamala is brat, and then followed Kamala's Instagram, I guess, or something. They both followed each other. I don't know if Kamala followed Charlie, but Charlie followed Kamala. And then the Joe Biden, like Gen Z led social media page on Twitter rebranded as Kamala HQ with a brat theme.
Which is the neon green and the black.
Exactly. And began like amplifying some of these memes, which are apparently now proliferating on TikTok.
The memification of her is really powerful, and like the coconut stuff is fun. It works in her favor. I like talking about it. I want to talk about Team Coconut, the Coconut Queen, coconut season. Give me a coconut beverage. Like, I don't even like that woman, and I'm like, I am fucking down for coconut season. I think the brat thing was really clever. I think that the things that she said, like the context, I can't stop talking about the context that I exist in.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
The greater context. I can't. It's like very, very sticky. It's a new kind of, it's really a new kind of speech that we haven't had in politics in a very long time. It's like a more palatable Marianne Williamson.
Yeah.
She gives like a little bit of that, right? And then what was the very last one that I saw? I saw these guys online, right-wing influencers, making fun of Kamala for this interview that she gave where she's talking about meeting her husband's mother, and her husband's Jewish, which is relevant because she does like this like little old lady Jewish kind of impersonation of like grabbing her face. And I believe the woman says something like, in Kamala's relaying the story of the mother-in-law saying something along the lines of, you're so much more beautiful in person than you are on television. And it's very self-deprecating and extremely charming. And Kamala laughs, she's cracking up, she's clearly actually laughing. And people are saying, you know, look at this idiot, and this is, you know, she's got a likability problem. I mean, she might have a likability problem, but that's not what I saw in that clip. What I saw in that clip was like a very fun wine aunt that I would be totally down to watch like horror movies with, and certainly gossip with. Like, that's like, she's got all sorts of tea about everyone in Congress, and she tells crazy stories probably. And I think it's dangerous for Trump. I feel that if she's smart enough to lean into her strengths here, which are, I guess, there's something feminine about her that is interesting and I think really relatable to people. It feels grounded and earthy. Like if she can just be that, if she can tap into her sort of authentic self and not run away from the kooky, weird shit she says, and then also have moderate policy positions, which are not hers. I mean, she's totally pivoting away from anything she's ever said before. And we're memory holing the fact, for example, that she was the border czar, and she had just super left-wing positions on immigration and I mean, everything else. If she can actually memory hole all that and just be relatable, I think it's dangerous for Trump. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they say like the winner of elections is often like the person you'd most like want to like go get a beer with, and I would imagine like getting a glass of Chardonnay with Kamala is like a pretty close second, because I agree, she does seem pretty fun, and yeah, the memes are definitely working in her favor. And if there was like, if Democrats were losing the youth vote based off like, you know, the Israel-Palestine situation or whatever, I think there is a world in which she is sort of like slowly but surely winning them back. So remains to be seen, but I can see it working for her.
She's going to have to start talking about positions and things. And I think that, you know, it is, I will say, just to maybe temper this a little bit, it's really easy to spin a fun story out of just a few clips. She's going to have to start talking about, for example, what she believes in. I think it's crazy watching people say that they're endorsing her and giving her $10 million, $20 million. And they don't even, I think she raised more money in over 24 hours or something than like any candidate in history. That's how desperate the Democrats were for a new candidate. They don't know what her policy positions are. They haven't decided that yet. So that is very crazy. And it's also it's a sad statement on what politics are in America. Like the fact that nobody even cares what her positions are on any of the important issues of the day, but she's going to have to start talking about them. And once she does, I mean, listen, I've seen enough of her interviews, longer form, to know that she's going to say some stupid shit. So we'll see how that lands. But for now, I mean, coconut season is powerful, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Kamala, it's interesting because she's really gotten so little airtime as VP, and I think the way that she could play into this and sort of because she's also mocked for saying like completely vacuous things. Like there's all these clips of her. There's an amazing clip of her where she's asked what culture is, and she goes on this like minute-long rant where she's like, "It's how you feel when you wake up in the morning," like all this stuff.
And culture is the way we express how we're feeling about the moment, and we should always find times to express how we feel about the moment that is a reflection of joy, because it comes in the morning.
But, you know, she does. I think the issue with Kamala is because she's been in politics for so long and she has adapted her political views in ways that to most people read as very kind of cynically, in search of what's most politically expeditious. It's hard to understand what she believes, because at first she was this very tough on crime prosecutor when she was in San Francisco in some ways, where, you know, felony prosecutions skyrocketed under her, and she tried to get undocumented minors who were convicted of felonies deported against sanctuary city rules. And this is why, like, Democrats, a lot of sort of more far left Democrats hate her. But then she kind of pivoted completely during the Black Lives Matter stuff, at least in rhetoric in a lot of cases.
There's a great old clip of her, speaking of The View, where McCain is grilling her on Ocasio-Cortez, who, and Megan just lists all of her positions. One of them is something like an 80% marginal income tax or something. And I mean, Matt, we should just play the clip, actually.
She's on 60 Minutes this weekend, proudly calling herself a radical. And she's promoting policies like saying that every single carbon emission in the country, every car, should be eliminated within the next 11 years, everything from a 70 to 80% tax rate. Do you agree that she could possibly, in this ideology of the socialist left, could splinter your party?
No. I think that she is challenging the status quo. I think that's fantastic. I think that, I used to teach before, especially before, in the last few years. And the thing that I always loved about teaching was when you teach, it requires you to defend the premise. Mm-hmm. And it requires you to re-examine the premise and question, is it still relevant?
And that's not, like you said, Sandra, like that's not who she was in San Francisco. And so there's a question of, I think we all know who she is she's just a political creature in the classic American mold, which means she believes in absolutely nothing but power. But it will be interesting to see how she intends to govern. I think extremely left wing based on what I know about her family and what she's done so far and the kind of stuff that she said throughout the last 4 years. It's just unclear what the voters will believe, if they'll really believe her when she says, no, I think we should have a border now. We'll see. You know what? We actually do have some information on it, because what I would like to kind of bring in now is a little bit more from our partner, Polymarket. So Polymarket, as we've discussed before, this is the betting market that we like. We are partnered with them. And I've talked about them a while now. Previously, we brought in their information before. I think it adds a really interesting, I said this before, it adds an interesting kind of layer to the conversation. It's more interesting to me than polling. And, or certainly with polling, I think it's very interesting. So Trump versus Kamala. Following Biden's announcement that he'll be stepping down, the odds of who will win obviously shifted to Trump. Before the announcement on Sunday, she was at 18%. So I think people already kind of thought this would happen. She jumped to 30, and now she's at about 34% as of Thursday when we're recording. Trump's a little bit steadier. He's at 62%, losing most of the gains he's made since the attempted assassination. And comparing to Polymarket, we've got on 538, Trump's only up 47% to her 45. But 538 has currently suspended that forecast. I think the more interesting one here, and something that we're going to have to talk about right now, I think, is the question of will Biden finish his term? And there's currently a 70% chance on Polymarket that Biden will finish it, dip below 50 on Monday due to rumors about his illness. This is when he had vanished. And you had like Laura Loomer talking about like helicopters and shit flying or not being allowed to fly overhead. And he was dying and it was imminent. And people were going nuts online. And I just remember thinking, I don't know. I don't know why Jill Biden would be setting a little heart emoji and not freaking out or sharing any information. But he didn't die. We saw him speak. And now we're at the odds of him being removed via the 25th Amendment, as high as 16% on Monday, are down to 6% today. So seems pretty low. But I will say that we still have months to go. And I saw that Biden gave a speech Wednesday night. So after kind of vanishing from Sunday until Wednesday, and that's when all those crazy rumors began circulating. And he finally spoke out more than just the statement that he gave to X or that he posted to X. I've heard people say it was good. I think it's probably falling along ideological lines to a certain extent. He seemed not well to me in that. He seemed totally far gone. There's something weird with his face. I think they must have Botoxed the hell out of him.
Yeah.
And maybe just like jabbed him with some kind of stimulants and sent him out there. But he looks like he's barely alive. And I was sad to see it. It made me uncomfortable. And I don't know that he's going to make it through. I really don't. I don't know how he can. He's clearly not in charge. And I think what this is going to come down to is, do the Republicans think that they have something that they can gain from going after him, or will they lose something? It'll come down to politics. But should he be in office? I don't think so. Not after seeing that speech. He also went after democracy. Like I think he said something crazy like this was the greatest attack on American democracy since the Civil War. And I was like, okay, there was World War II, right? like Hiroshima. What was it? Hiroshima was how we answered. Pearl Harbor happened, and we fought the Japanese, and we fought the Germans, and then there was like a very long Cold War, and a lot happened. But I don't know. January 6th, that I was not very intimidated by that personally. He is really clinging to that. He really framed it like. He said, I brought us out of that. He said, this is like his accomplishment was bringing the country out of the darkness of almost losing our democracy when I guess the shaman dude walked into the halls of Congress and stood at the podium or whatever. Maybe we almost magically became an authoritarian country at that moment. Again, wasn't my read, but what do you guys think? Is he going to finish the term or what?
I've seen, I think Trump has actually came out against the 25th Amendment because he's like, this is going to be a dangerous precedent. They're going to use it against me. So that's an interesting wrinkle. But
that is interesting.
So I would guess I'd put my odds on no at this point. But yeah, we'll see.
It's not worth it for the Republicans to force the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see who would stand to benefit, except obviously the American people, but they're never involved in any political calculation. It reminds me, like in the weeks leading up to Biden dropping out, when you had this barrage of like Democratic leaks suggesting what everyone knew for months, but that was an unspeakable sort of reality about Biden's his mental condition, his sort of, whether or not he was senile. There was a really interesting leak that was reported in Semaphore by a Biden staffer who was not part of the like inner circle that, was sort of Biden's closest confidants, but who worked apparently in the White House, and said that they were concerned because major policy decisions were seemingly made without Biden's involvement, or there was this kind of convoluted process by which, they would send a policy memo and then it would go through all these mysterious channels. They never talked to Biden, and then it would come back with modifications, and they didn't know how this was happening. And so my assumption would be at this point, the White House staffers are probably very used to working with a kind of physically diminished Biden and getting things done without him. And he's kind of, my assumption is basically just kind of a figurehead who occasionally gets up and gives speeches. And if he can stay in like the minimal physical condition required to keep doing that, which clearly isn't very high because, he routinely gives speeches with these kind of remarkable gaffes, then I don't see why they would remove him. And it just seems like it would be a distraction. Incidentally, I saw Willie Brown, Kamala's ex-paramour and former mayor of San Francisco, came out and said...
Not talk about that anymore. That's sexist. You cannot bring up how Kamala got her first job.
I think it's interesting color. I think you have to judge her based on her long political career. I also think I don't think it's a good tactic for the right to highlight like that she did this, because I think it will backfire. And there was a big, I don't know if this is that relevant, but there was a influencer on Twitter who posted a picture of her stepdaughter and said something like, Kamala doesn't have any natural children of her own. and like posted a picture of this young woman, and everyone was sort of like, angrily replying about how like, why are you going after her daughter, and et cetera. So, but that aside, Willie Brown came out and said Biden should step down. I don't know if anyone in DC is listening to Willie Brown at this point, but I thought that was kind of interesting.
Well, I guess because the last piece here is, he's obviously a hardcore Democrat. He's obviously a huge Kamala fan. We know that. And does it work in her favor to be the president going into this election? Suddenly she's the incumbent, first female president ever. I don't know what that means. I think it could, I would be outraged. Would I be outraged? Would it be, this is really the question. Is it better to have the deep state de facto in charge right now, or like a sort of, almost officially in charge at this point, because we know that Biden's not, or Kamala? Who do I trust more as the commander in chief? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
But don't you think it's scary to think that, I mean, in some ways, this whole fast swap of Biden, whatever, hot swap, has been kind of scary because it's shown how the power of the executive can be undermined pretty dramatically. Like,
yes.
I mean, you know, Biden clearly didn't want to drop out and his hand was forced.
Yes, absolutely. There is a very scary authoritarian thing happening in the country right now. And this is another example of it. And it's a huge example. And I get really, I had a conversation with a reporter yesterday, and he was really pressing me on democracy. He thinks that we are maybe anti-democracy. He wanted to know if I thought we should have a dictator. And I was like, what the fuck are you, where did you get that? And it's because we like joke around about shit. And he was like picking up one of my jokes and being like, well, do you think this? And he's like really scared. And it's because he thinks that anybody who's not a Biden supporter or anyone who's like, and we haven't even like publicly endorsed Trump or anything, but he's like, they're very afraid of authoritarianism, the left, let's say. And they're afraid of losing democracy. And I look around and I'm like, what democracy? What democracy are you talking about? We're talking about trying to jail the front runner opposition candidate in the middle of an election. That's still happening. We're talking about dissolving the courts. We have people, that's a totally mainstream position now on the left, is seizing the courts, packing them with open partisans, and using that to legislate from the bench. Like that's like one of their policy proposals now. And now you have this straight up coup in the party. And you know, that's following years of evolution ideologically on really important things, ranging everywhere from freedom of speech to bodily autonomy, right? We had coerced vaccination throughout the Biden years where government workers were literally forced to get a vaccine. And if they didn't, they would lose their jobs. People are always like, well, they weren't forced. They could have lost their livelihood. You know, they could have sacrificed their ability to feed their kids. It wasn't being forced. They were forced. They were forced to jab themselves with an experiment.
Brought to you by Pfizer.
You know, that evolution was happening while they were making, and now we're here in the election, and all these other things are happening. And, you know, they want to talk about January 6th, which was to me a riot. We had seen 6 months of rioting before that, which were absolutely deranged. It reminds me a lot of the fact right now. So in DC, Wednesday, Netanyahu spoke, and we had all of these. We joke around sometimes and call them the Hamas supporters. These were literal Hamas supporters, waving Hamas flags, talking about scrawling Hamas graffiti on our statues and the Liberty. Is there a Liberty Bell in DC? By the way, it said Liberty Bell, but that's in Philadelphia.
That's in Philly. DC
so what was that?
I think it's a replica that they put in.
So graffiti scrawled all over it, all the Hamas shit. Flag burning, okay? Flags have been ripped down and Palestinian flags were raised and there was burning flags. I'm trying not to focus on this too much because I think it's like such a black pill and just a negative vibe. But there's, I think, something sort of interesting about it, which is the question of, you know, everybody obviously rushing to the internet, getting mad about it, saying there should be consequences. Kamala herself came out against all this stuff. Okay, but what are you going to do about it? And to me, I'm like, well, there's not really much you can do about it. This is free speech. And I mean, the public defacing of things, of course, you can do something about that. You can stop them from doing that. If someone wants to bring a flag and burn it, I think that's disgusting, but they can do it, right? Here it's a little bit complicated because they took the flag down from public property. So maybe they can get arrested for defacing public property or something. I don't know. I don't think the crime for just random public destruction is probably that high in Washington, D.C. So it would be a stretch to me if you were suddenly arresting somebody and jailing them for burning a flag. But then I looked online and, dude, there are story after story about people throughout, like, let's start with 2020 or the 2020 era, the BLM era. The Proud Boys dude going down for burning a BLM flag. Now, there are complications of the story. He took the flag from a church. It's a theft of some kind. And then he was caught with, I think, magazines or something in his car which was some sort of an arms charge. But the actual charges against him that sent him to prison for 5, or at least he was convicted. He was supposed to. I didn't follow the story very closely, but he was convicted for. The sentence was 5 months in prison. Included the destruction of private property. Okay, like how many times in San Francisco, when someone breaks into a car, do they go to prison? Never? 0 times? Is it like only if you burn something from that car publicly do you go to prison? Is it only if you burn a BLM flag? Because I think it's probably that. We see all of these kids who are facing jail time for defacing the rainbow crosswalk. And I saw another one that I have to look into because it was really crazy, facing years of prison. I think it was in Illinois for burning a rainbow flag. That was charged, I believe, as a hate crime. And so it's like, I'm okay burning the flag, free speech, down, but it can't be only the American flag, okay? And when it's not, that makes me feel like we are playing by a new set of rules. We all sort of intuitively know that and understand that on some level, that these other people, leftists, are in charge culturally and politically, and if you run afoul of them, really horrible things can happen to you. And it's like, oh, well, that's the law. You have to follow the law. I agree people should follow the law, but only one kind of person actually seems to receive consequences. The fact that she's just running for president and we're just supposed to not even talk about it. I tweeted about this the other day. I mean, I'm flooded with lefties in my mentions like, you're an idiot for not knowing that this is how the Democratic nomination process works. You know, they're pulling all the shit out of their ass. Like, if you weren't so ignorant, you would know that this was totally normal. Really, is it normal? Has there ever in our lifetime been a Democratic candidate for president who was not voted for in a primary? Has that ever happened? Has that ever happened in our parents' lives? Our grandparent? When was the last time that happened? I guess probably post-assassination. You would have had probably Ford maybe would have counted. Did he even run? It's like, it's clearly a problem. I think it's just like clearly a huge problem. I don't know how to get at it. It's a danger I think that we're currently facing, is this gradual slip into real authoritarianism.
Yeah. And yet the other side will say the real danger to democracy and the real authoritarian thing is Project 2025, which is like something that Trump continues to disavow. Exactly.
Right. Firing bureaucrats is the real danger here. Is it? I don't care about bureaucrats. Do I care about democracy? Let's start with the fucking Democratic Party. Do they care about democracy? When is the vote? When is that happening? Goddamn. You know who we got to bring in? John Coogan to talk about the Battle of the Billionaires. Dialing in from domestic bliss. Sunny Pasadena, domestic bliss. Coogan, who just had, or Coogan's wife, who just had twins. He's got 3 kids now running around. Well, I guess 2 are not running around yet. But First of all, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And second of all, thanks for joining us on the pod. Coogan is here just for a segment today. He is going to help us navigate this escalating VC status war along one specific dimension that I really want to focus on, which is the history of Zenefits, which I think is about to become a very big part of the sort of ongoing escalating drama that you're watching unfold online, that I do think is mostly politically motivated, but we can talk about that in a second. First, I think just sort of like it's a funny... I mean, I think it's funny. I don't think they think it's funny. I don't think that anyone at Khosla thinks it's funny. We got to talk about the Battle of the Billionaires. So, Vinod Khosla, he's a sort of super Trump deranged, like very angry older gentleman, who's also a famous investor and founder in the Valley. He's very high status, has a lot of friends, and attracts a certain level of attention no matter what he says, no matter how stupid it is. And what he came out with was this idea of the global citizen. He's been going on and on about the need to, I guess, support Kamala now. He wants everybody to come together. Anyone who's not MAGA, selfish, or Trump, or sort of anyone who is a never Trumper should come together, support Kamala. He's not saying what her positions are. I don't think that she's decided what her positions are yet, is probably what's going on there. But the thing and I'm fine with that. I don't care. Support Kamala. I'm totally happy with it. Someone else who came out with one of those was Mark Pincus. And I thought that was sort of well stated. He talked about moderation and he's going to support her until whatever, blah, blah, blah. He said it in a thoughtful way. I think it's like we're in a moment now when people need to voice their opinion. They feel like very strongly about something and we're all getting a little amped up and whatever. What I don't like about Vinod's is the way he talked about the importance of being a global citizen, a good global citizen. That's a concept that I don't believe is real. And I think it's also like a pretty dangerous concept for only Americans to believe in. The idea that, we're not American citizens first, but the rest of the world can be, like Kenyan first, or I don't know, whatever other country, like Australian first, or certainly maybe the French. I think the French kind of have French first down, even though they are dealing with a lot of the same immigration problems that we are. Anyway, I tweeted about it. I did not quote Vinod. I did not say Vinod's name, but Vinod Khosla quote tweeted me. And in so doing, it was like, it's a very sort of aggressive action, and it called me selfish. And we got into it, and we had it was a brief back and forth that absolutely blew up. Group chats were ablaze. Every person in tech had a sort of opinion about it. And that's not because of me, though I do wonder why Vinod was so stupid to lower himself to talk to someone like me online. But he did. And I will just say on that, I was not looking for this. And it's like Vinod knocked on the door. I answered the door. I'm always going to answer the door. I am incapable of not answering the door. Okay. That's why I'm in the seat that I'm in. That's why we're here. That's how Pirate Wires exists. It's not because I'm like, I need to be really thoughtful about the fight. And, it's just I can't help myself. So you all need to know that. For people listening who are maybe thinking about like, should I say some shit to Mike Solana online? Should I quote tweet him? You can do it. I cannot control myself. Okay, I'm going to respond. Well, the reason everyone got involved is because what we're watching is this like very politicized, escalating intra-tech war happening, and it's all over the question of Trump. People who are associated with Trump, or they seem to be associated with Trump, versus the people who are never Trumpers. I think that you have people on the left very, very nervous because they feel like they've lost power for the first time ever in history in Silicon Valley. Now, Coogan, you wrote a piece for Pirate Wires that I think did a great job of adding some context to that. I'm not convinced that that's the case. I think that the evidence still clearly indicates that all of the money is on the side of the Democrats. I think especially now you're seeing that that's totally true. Yep. But the status piece is still really interesting. Like the fact that David Sachs can talk about Trump and Chamath can talk about Trump, and even Jason Calacanis can be like, I'm going to be a sort of both sides are making good points kind of guy right now about Trump. That is really threatening to people. And the way that bubbled over, which is a much more interesting drama than the Battle of the Billionaires, was all on the question of, let's start it with the question of a coup. David Sachs tweeting about politics, as per usual, references the Democratic coup that unseated Joe Biden and placed in Kamala, which I will say is very interesting that nobody voted for this woman and she's running for president. Don't know how it happened, but just putting that out there. We can maybe discuss it later. He's like, that's a coup. And he goes off in his David Saxian way. Well, Parker Conrad quote tweets him. And he says something along the lines of like, this man knows about coups. Now, what Parker Conrad is referencing is the Zenefits story. Parker's company that ended with him being unseated and David Sachs became CEO. It was huge drama. John's going to break it down in just one more second because I want to add one final piece of context to this, which is Paul Graham responded. Paul Graham, who is also a never Trumper, who has also been sort of very vocal on the question of politics, who is pro the presidential the Trump prosecution. He is definitely in people's mentions talking about this, he's been making sort of lots of little comments, clearly frustrated about this sort of MAGA thing that's happening in Silicon Valley. He backs up Parker, sort of makes it more explicit what he's talking about, which is, the idea that David Sachs stole his company, he's saying, and says that David, Paul's always talking to his friends. He's always talking to founders. And one of the founders he was talking to said, David Sachs, is there a more evil person in Silicon Valley? We couldn't think of one. David then quote tweets that. And now David is a whole long thing. Chamath's piling on. We're going to talk about it on the All In pod, which is happening today. So you guys should all check that out, because I think it's going to be absolutely like a nuclear bomb. Chamath is promising receipts. David Sachs, in his clapback to Paul, while breaking down stuff about Zenefits, which John's going to tell us the whole story in a second, he also includes one really final important piece, which is the rumor that during the outbreak of war in Israel, when everybody sort of lost their mind, some people still have and are really, really animated about this issue, Paul apparently, possibly, allegedly, reached out to the general partners of more than one major venture capital firm, one of we're talking about the top firms in Silicon Valley, and told the GP to fire junior partners who were vocally supportive of Israel. It could be more than that. I'm not entirely sure why he allegedly reached out and asked these people to fire them. It could be because of conversations that he himself had with them online. But that is now, I would say, the rumor circulating. David Sachs went directly for it, said, if I'm evil, what is that? And now it's just a sort of evolving drama. And I have a lot of thoughts about it, why it's happening. I know you guys do as well. But first, the piece that I think is going to kind of become central throughout the rest of the week probably is the Zenefits thing. What are people talking about when they reference that, the coup at Zenefits, and what is the real history between Parker and Sachs, and why does it matter, and how do you protect your company from that kind of thing if you're a founder? Coogan, thank you for coming. I know that was a long intro, but there's a lot here.
There is.
Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, the Parker Conrad Zenefits story is potentially the greatest comeback story in Silicon Valley history. It's definitely up there. It's one of my favorite stories. Parker grew up in New York, went to Harvard, wrote for the Crimson, and then moves out to Silicon Valley, starts one company that doesn't go that well. And then finally, while he's struggling to get the first company working, interestingly, that first company actually went on and did well kind of after he left. And there was there was actually an earlier coup where his co-founder's parents came in and said, hey, this business needs money. We'll bridge it if you get rid of Parker. It was a kind of chaotic situation. But in that experience, he's trying to make payroll. He's trying to pay his employees and give them health benefits. And he can't figure it out. He has so many different forms to fill out. It's a hassle. And so the classic kind of YC story of solve a problem that you intimately know, a problem that you're having. He wants to found a new company that's focused on HR software. So pay your employees, give them healthcare. And he calls it Zenefits. He gets into YC, and very quickly it becomes the fastest growing software company of all time. And a lot of that was due to the fact that they had this very clever business model where they would give you the software for free. And when you clicked, I want this healthcare plan, they would get the commission as if they were a healthcare salesperson, basically, which is a ton of money, because these healthcare plans, if you're on a healthcare plan, your company might be paying $1,000 a month for that, something like that. And so $1,000 a month for years and years and years. The commission pulls forward and it's thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. So Zenefits was just racking these up. It was an incredible business model. And so they were just piling venture dollars into hiring salespeople, scaling really, really quickly. Tons of money comes in. They very quickly go from, a YC company. In 2 years, they were worth billions. I was actually I used Zenefits at the time. It was very helpful. It was actually pretty good software. I also used the same lawyer as them. And so I was doing a Series A at the time. It was taking us forever. And I was talking to the counsel who did the Zenefits deal and was like, well, they raised 500 million. It must have taken months to get that across the finish line. He was like, oh no, it goes faster when it's like so big and like everyone just wants to put their money in. So everything was just scaling super, super fast. And of course, things start breaking. And so then there's a series of reporting that comes out. Interestingly, it started with BuzzFeed, which was not really known for their investigative journalism, but eventually this guy, Ralph Winkler at the Wall Street Journal takes over and kind of writes the definitive investigative journalism pieces. There's allegations of using a tool to cheat these state licensing exams. There's like a general bro culture. There's a lot of like brotopia type criticism around them. It's like they had probably 1,000 sales guys, maybe not 1,000, but like they had like a lot of sales guys in an office in Phoenix, Arizona. These guys
remember stories about
partying. Yeah,
I remember stories about people having sex in the stairwells.
Yes,
and
so yeah,
that was the one that I think really blew up, which I was, by the way, highly in favor of. I was like, come on, let them live, and they live.
We were pronatalists. I thought we were pronatalists, and
yeah, we have now. And you want to know what happened? They punished him for that, and a few years later, population declined.
Exactly. That's where it started, for sure. But the funny thing is that was potentially fake news because they were in a building with a lot of other companies. And what happened was the landlord sent out an email saying, hey, we found a condom wrapper in the stairwell. They sent it out to all the tenants.
Okay, Karen.
But yeah, seriously. But because Zenefits was like, okay, the eye is on us. We need to send out an email to our employees saying like, look, it could have been anyone in this building, but it can't be a Zenefits employee. And then that became the story. So even though they were like one of 10 companies that could have been responsible, they took all the fire because no one knows who the other companies were. It was like a law firm or, whatever, marketing firm. And so all of this culminates with like immense pressure on Parker, because there's just so many, just hit piece after hit piece after hit piece. And so the investors come in, and David Sachs had come in as chief operating officer, and he was like an amazing get for Zenefits. And Parker's on record at the time saying like, I'm the luckiest CEO ever. I have this god tier operator on my team. Because David Sachs is PayPal Mafia. He'd started Yammer and sold it to another B2B software company that he'd sold to Microsoft for $1 billion. And then he was a huge investor. And it was crazy that he was going back in the arena and actually working for a company. But everyone thought Zenefits was going to be incredible. And the guy who led the deal at Andreessen, this guy Lars Dalgaard, doesn't work there anymore. He had started a very similar company called in the HRIS space called Success Factors, and he sold it for $3 billion. And so Lars was looking at this and was like, this is the same business. I've seen this playbook before. When it works, just pour fuel on the fire. And so all of these like, all the arrows were pointing in the same direction, like just push, push, push. But then there's this question about, oh, Parker, there's all this scrutiny. Can we push him out? And they wind up.
Wait, pause. Was there not an Sachs alleges there's some kind of SEC?
Yeah. So during this time, there were a number of fines that came from state and local agencies. And I actually haven't seen the SEC one that he's talking about, but Parker very clearly wasn't. Normally when there's like an SEC thing, like Shkreli can never run a hedge fund again because the SEC said like you're banned. Same thing with Henry Blodgett, the founder of Business Insider. He can never trade stocks again or run a fund because the SEC like sanctioned him. And I think Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes, same thing. Clearly that's not the case with Parker because he's running the exact same company. He started Rippling and he grew Rippling bigger than Zenefits ever was. So, clearly like the SEC fine, most of these fines, when I looked into them, I mean, they were speeding tickets. Like it was like $50K, which sounds like a lot to like normal people. But like when you have $500 million in your bank account because you're one of the fastest growing startups in history, it's like, yeah, you probably shouldn't be breaking the law. You should clean up your act. Like don't get fines. But at the end of the day, $50K for like making a mistake on a form or doing something, like it's not that big of a deal. This stuff does happen. Even Apple pays fines. Facebook has paid fines, like big successful, like a couple fines does not preclude you from building like a solid business model. And clearly Parker knew something that everyone else didn't, which is this concept of we shouldn't just be doing payroll or just be doing HR. We need to do it all. And so that's what he did when he came back with with Rippling, he kind of built the vision that he had, which was this compound startup that does a little bit of everything, instead of just being focused on one thing. Sachs, when he took over, was like, no, we don't need to be doing too many things. That's too complicated. We need to focus on just one really strong execution in one thing, healthcare and payroll or whatever. And we saw the two companies diverge. Rippling started growing and has now been on a tear. And Rippling Zenefits wound up selling for kind of pennies on the dollar. It was not a very good outcome. And so I think Parker feels very vindicated at this point. I think the market has really vindicated Parker, at least as an operator of a healthcare B2B SaaS company. Not to say anything about political or, is investing. I mean, Sachs has a bunch of great accolades as well. But in terms of running this type of company, Parker clearly saw something that no one else did. And I think that's
what exactly happened though. Let's I want to focus on how Parker lost his job.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just like immense pressure. David Sachs is already
not just
there.
His job, his company.
Yeah. So David Sachs is already there as the COO, and Sachs was always, he'd been the CEO of a large startup before that had sold. He was ready for that role, and I think it made a lot of sense. You're in a crisis. Let the more advanced, let the adults take over. Of course, we now know that almost never works unless they're really, really far along. When you're in those first few years, having the founder mentality, having the founder drive things is so important. And that's what wound up playing out. But yeah, I mean, at the time, the investors kind of asked him to take a leave of absence and then kind of pushed him to the side. And then there was the first big debate. So as Parker tells it, he was okay with the idea of like, look, yeah, there is a ton of pressure. Let's let David take over for a little bit. But then he was like, if I'm out. I'm going to go start another company. I want a fresh start. And then the real boiling point, I think, at least as he tells it, is that they had communications that were agreed on, like what the press release was going to say. And the original press release that Parker had kind of approved said, we thank Parker Conrad for his service. Like, he's been great. Like, we're excited for this new era of leadership, like nothing negative. And then Parker claims that David switched out the press release the last second and made it much more negative towards Parker. And that's something that Parker's like basically never forgiven and keeps bringing up on podcasts when he talks about it.
So your sense is that actually it could have been the transition could have happened and not been quite so bitter had maybe
absolutely
you little things changed at the end. It wasn't even necessarily that Parker was leaving.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that there are ways to weather these storms. We've seen it with Brian Armstrong. We've seen it with Zuck. We've seen it with, plenty of entrepreneurs that we love and have made it through the ringer of all the negative press. You just need everyone on your team really aligned and backing you from start to finish. And the problem is that in this case, they broke rank and all the investors were like, hey, we're the big shots. You're this new guy. You've only been in Silicon Valley a year or two. Like, you're young. Yeah, it's cool what you built. You clearly found a really interesting business model, but like, we can take it from here. They clearly couldn't have taken it from there. And Parker really did have something special, which is fascinating.
This is in an era of, Travis Kalanick lost his company in a similar way. It feels like similar to me, with a media pylon that leads to an opening for a transition, let's call it. And I think it's really sad when things break down this way. I think with Brian Armstrong, what you saw was the industry defending him. They were like, we're not doing this again, which was interesting. Man, this one's tough. This is really, this whole entire controversy is really tough, and it's going to get a lot tougher, I think, as the next week moves on. I'm obviously, John, you and I work at Founders Fund. Founders Fund's invested in Parker's new company. I like Parker. David Sachs has been around forever. He's one of Peter's oldest friends. Love David Sachs.
This is all just friendly fire. I like all these guys. PG back both of these
I don't
companies.
think that is, they're not friendly for us. We're not involved in this. Founders Fund is, by the way, never fired a founder, never will.
Yes.
But this stuff is like definitely deep wounds. It is super bitter. It is now being, I think, capitalized on by people for political purposes. And I think the thing that's important to keep in mind right now is falling along very obviously, like the drama that we're watching online unfold crazily on X, where people do, it's crazy to see. Like, Sanjana, you had a good take on that, and we'll get to that in a second. It's straight up like Paul is he's not voting for Trump. He's anti-Trump. Parker is anti-Trump. Parker has been in my mentions talking. I don't want to get too much into that because I would like to actually talk to Parker about some of this stuff one-on-one. I don't want him to feel like I'm going after him publicly in this way. But he's definitely made it clear online that he has a problem with Trump. Sachs is donating to Trump. Like, Vinod is a never Trumper who's donating to Kamala Harris. Like, all of them are clearly divided. Not really. They're divided along political lines. There's like this increasingly hostile political war happening in Silicon Valley that now the media is about to amplify. They're circling around it. I think that Sachs definitely is going to become the villain in this story because Sachs is a huge funder of Donald Trump, and most of the press hates Donald Trump. So I think that you're probably going to see, it's going to be very interesting because the press really spent a lot of years, or at least one very decisive year, totally demonizing Parker and doing everything it possibly could to destroy his company. And now, in about 5 minutes, you're going to see them turn him into a hero that was destroyed by David Sachs. I think that's the story that's going to happen.
Yeah, I think you're right.
That fucking pisses me off. And I really hope that, I know it's hard because everyone's pissed at everyone right now. This is what happens in every election cycle. This one happens to be way crazier than most. My prediction of a boring election, totally wrong. This one is like very, very, very bitter. I think that you have both sides feeling like the other side is actually authoritarian, actually wants to destroy them. It's going to get worse, I think. I know it's hard to see through that, but the press manipulation that's coming, man, I wish that people could just lock it up and see that for what it is and resist it. But I don't know that they will be able to.
Okay, I have one question and then I got to run. How do you think about, I mean, you talked to a lot of founders. How do you think founders should think about positioning their political ideology? I've talked to some people about like being minimally viably political in the sense that like, look, if there's an existential to your business, if there's an existential risk to your business, yeah, you probably got to go and support that political issue one way or another. But you shouldn't just be out there cheering for one side or the other because you're basically just creating landmines that you could step on later. How do you think founders?
I don't think you should be. Yes, I don't think that you should be. People are always like, "How do I be more open about my opinions?" And I'm like, fucking do not do it. Are you like, why would you be talking about politics online unless it's part of what you're doing, unless there's a benefit in, if you cannot discern a benefit from that, then you should not be doing it. I think there is a benefit in being really political in the way that Brian Armstrong really paved the way forward on, which is just like, I will be highly political on topics related to my business only. For founders, I think for VCs, it's very different because VCs have a much easier job and they are not going to be losing customers because they're just money and people want that. But for everybody else, it's much more dangerous. There's much more risk to the press. I would probably avoid that, and I would definitely select venture capitalists when you're looking for VCs. You should always be asking them like, you know, what founders have you fired and what was the reason? I think that's a pretty important question to ask always. And I think it's one that people have lost sight of somehow, which is crazy because we've seen these really high profile ones. I mean, I still think about Travis Kalanick and how Gurley is just has been canonized as this incredible person.
Did you see Emil Michael in the replies?
Oh yes, yeah.
Emil Michael is like, whoa, like let's not go after Sachs. Let's keep the focus.
Yeah, he's like, we got to stay focused on the real enemy here.
Yeah, exactly.
But the fact that like people just are like, oh, that's a celebrated guy, Gurley, after what he did there that's gnarly. I mean, founders need to be just aware of that. This is always a dynamic, and you're always at risk. Coogan, thank you for joining. Sanjana, Riley, we're going to keep this one up, but I'll see you later, man.
See you later. Bye.
So I want to carry on before we get to the next segment on the just sort of battle of the billionaires thing. And Sanj, I want to start with you. You had a thought about just the nature of it all happening on Twitter in general that I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit I have not been following this billionaire drama nearly as long as you guys have. But I do think it's interesting that like this is on the heels of Biden surprise announcing his departure, or his, the fact that he's not pursuing the nomination on X, apparently a minute before his senior advisors found out. And now you've got this, feud happening in live time that you can only find on X as well. And so to me, it's just like, X in some ways is like the greatest sort of entertainment on earth. I mean, it's also, we said at one point, like, it's also kind of this toxic gas station, like waste dump where you're sort of constantly inundated with insane, potentially AI generated brain cell killing content. So it's certainly not like everything you see on X is edifying or even entertaining, but I do think it's actually a big credit to the platform that like this kind of stuff is happening on it, and that it's only happening on it. And, Elon has, I think, repeatedly said in interviews that like really X is kind of the only platform that gives you kind of direct access to some of the most powerful people in the world. And that like, it's one of the few platforms where you can potentially as a nobody sort of reach out to these people and get their attention. And to me, this kind of lends credence to it. But sort of getting into the specifics of the conflict itself, I was a little bit confused as to why Paul Graham got into the arena in the first place. I don't know, Mike, if you could speak to that a bit.
I think that he is completely Trump deranged in a way that is dangerous to his own reputation at this point, because it's dragging him into conflicts like this where he really does not seem to have a leg to stand on when it comes to like really, I think, listen, I don't know what's going to come out about him trying to get people fired, but for the sort of cancel culture guy who's been beating the drum on that forever, and I've done it too, right? But I've never tried to get someone fired. Okay. I'm not calling up VCs and saying, you got to get rid of this guy who I disagree with about Palestine on Twitter. You got to kick him out of your fund. That's again, I hadn't seen the emails. I have, I'm trying to think of what to say here, because I feel bad. I think Y Combinator is going to get caught up in this. And I love those guys. They had nothing to do with what Paul has or has not been using them as a bargaining tool for potentially. My sense is that he's been, again, more noise is going to come out. I don't want to preemptively say anything that I don't know for sure. I think this is too sensitive of a subject, but I do know that these rumors have been around for a while. They're more than rumors. And the fact that Paul would go after David like this, of course this was going to come out. Of course it was going to be used against him. You cannot be calling someone evil when you have skeletons in your closet like this, and probably you shouldn't be doing it anyway. I mean, we're all in the same space. We're all in the same field. It's really immature. And again, it's sort of contra his brand. He's supposed to be the thoughtful guy, the anti-cancel culture guy, the let's have a polite discussion guy. I don't want any spicy language kind of guy. Even the way he talks about writing, which is so boring. I'm so tired. I'm going to say one pointed thing about Paul Graham, which is his advice on writing. Do not listen to it. I'm like Kamala Harris right now. Like, do not come. Do not come.
I'm going to come.
Okay, like stay the fuck away from Paul Graham's advice on writing. If you want to be an adequate writer, if you want to be able to just write a coherent email that gets the point across, if that's your goal in writing, then I think Paul Graham's advice, which is totally stripped down to the bare bones, is perfectly fine. In terms of style, what he's talking about is not his. He's cribbing from Hemingway, and Hemingway does it with a kind of elegance that I've not seen, let's say, other contemporary writers do. If your goal is to be a great writer, you need to write with like your entire being. Okay, this is a longer conversation we can all have later, but you need to be able to bring people into your world and make them feel what you're feeling and then take them on a journey. And he does not do that. He is an adequate writer, and he's a successful writer in that he's used writing to become very popular in Silicon Valley. And he's very, clearly expressed, I think, several interesting opinions and points and things like this throughout his career. But broadly, no, not into his advice on writing. And I think that his Trump derangement has really led him astray here and led him into a battle that he can't win. And maybe he doesn't care. I mean, I think he lives in England now, in a castle somewhere. He's not super plugged into tech. I think he likes to pretend that he still is. I think it probably hurts him on some level that the status has shifted. And I think all of this, the Vinod stuff for sure. We saw this previously with Vinod targeting the all-in guys. Now we see Paul Graham going after them. I think, and even with honestly, I don't mean to drag myself into it, but even with Vinod sort of targeting me in the way that he did, who am I? I'll tell you who I am. I'm someone who gets attention on Twitter. And I think he's seeing that very stupidly being sort of jealous of it, which is so embarrassing for a billionaire famous investor. Like, dude, you know who's not on Twitter? Peter Thiel. Okay. There's a reason for that, because it's sort of embarrassing to be here. It's like, why are you getting in these fights? And I think that most of what's happening with those guys versus especially the all-in guys is a response to the shifting status right now and a feeling of just professional jealousy and jealousy more broadly. And I think it's getting everybody into these really stupid arguments. And I think they're going to escalate because the election's only going to get more bitter, right? It's like, it's never this bad in July. This one is getting just really bitter. I mean, every single side is saying the other side wants to kill them. So I don't know. I don't remember it ever. Everyone always says, this election is the most important election in history or whatever. But I've never seen an election be so jaded before, and hateful before. And it feels very dark. I guess maybe part of that is because in the last elections, you weren't allowed to say that you liked Trump. And so at least in the Silicon Valley in the Silicon Valley context, certainly what happened to Peter in 2016 was absolutely disgusting and despicable. And everybody was a coward back then. And so we didn't see the bitterness because nobody was talking about these things in public. People were just being silent. I think maybe 4 years ago was a little bit of the same. But yeah, that's kind of roughly what I think about the Battle of the Billionaires. Riley, last thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Sanjana. It's just surprising to see it all being aired out publicly like this. And I think I sort of realize X is sort of the court of public opinion. So in that way, it sort of makes sense. If you want people to get on your side, it makes sense to lay out your opinion publicly. But I guess I'm very grateful for that because as a result, I got to enjoy this nice little billionaire reality TV show. So I say keep it up.
Crazy story. Last week, it's somehow, and the really crazy thing about it is that it is like the third craziest story of the last 10 days or whatever. Last Friday, the whole world just sort of turns off. There is a major CrowdStrike glitch that takes down banks, sort of customer-facing stores across the country, and crucially, airlines for not just a few hours, but in some cases, literally days. I was on my way to New Jersey to visit my family, or I was supposed to be, and the flight was canceled. Could not get a new flight until the following Tuesday, and I ended up canceling it. I had colleagues from Founders Fund stranded in Miami for literally days, and I want to talk about sort of how that happened. I want to talk about the glitch itself. I want to talk about, I'll let Sanjana take it away in a second. There's an interesting EU connection here that really needs to be addressed. But first and foremost, what I want to talk about is how crazy it was that it barely made the news. This is the largest IT failure in, I think, human history, certainly in American history. I can't imagine. I don't know what you count as IT, right? Like if the aqueducts went down or something, maybe that would count. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure in human history, this was the largest IT failure. We're talking about billions and billions and billions in damages, and people immobilized for days and days. And we're just sort of used to it. And that was my main takeaway from it was I originally on Friday, before it really started evolving, I had a pen to a brief take on it. I was kind of flippant. And then over the weekend, when the reality of it set in, I realized, man, I'm being part of the problem right now. This isn't really funny. This is a failure, once again, of our capacity to build and do things in this world. And it extends not only throughout the government, which you expect, but the private sector. This would not have been acceptable 10 or 20 years ago. And in fact, I was thinking back to the 1965, I think it was 65 or 67, the blackouts in throughout the Northeast. My mom still talks about those. That was a huge deal for the boomers. Okay. This was a 13-hour blackout. And books were written about it. There were documentaries. Like, it was a huge deal. There are blackouts in California constantly now. Nobody talks about it. And I think that we've internalized that failure to build, that inability to build. And that's the thing that scares me. Sanj, I would love you to kind of break down what happened there before you get into the actual glitch and then the EU Connect. If you had any thoughts about any of this, you can also share them. Feel free.
I mean, just very high level in terms of why most people probably won't remember this. I just feel like it's information overload. Like, we have this constant never-ending feed of content and, new trending topics sort of every second, it seems. And so it's just, I feel like mentally we're not equipped to, I mean, are people still in their day-to-day lives talking about the assassination attempt? Maybe. Yeah. But I feel anecdotally like a lot of people are now we're talking about Kamala, we're talking about Brat, whatever, but like, it just feels like information is moving so quickly that we're not actually able to give things the attention and time they need to like cement in our minds and sort of form core memories. It's a little bit scary, honestly.
That's interesting. That piece right there with the inability to form the memories themselves.
Yeah.
We've all touched on pieces of this, I think, in our work at Pirate Wires. It does feel like the last 10 years are a blur. I mean, the last 5 years certainly are a blur. I think it has to do with the internet. The nature of the medium itself has gotten us to this point where obviously the digital record is totally impermanent, super ephemeral. It changes constantly. We saw a bit of this. Where did we see? Oh, we've been seeing this with Kamala this is a softer version, but I mean, sometimes, entries in dictionaries and things just straight up change magically in front of you as words become controversial. But in the case of Kamala, you're seeing people retroactively, Axios, for example, going back into old reporting and saying, on the question of the border czar, right? They said recently this week, she was not a border czar. That never happened. This is a Republican talking point. That's a piece of reporting from Axios. Not only did Axios report that she was a border czar, that exact phrase being used by Axios reporting, the same writer, okay, is covering this in a totally different way. As outrageous as that is, the most outrageous part was that Axios finally succumbed to outrage and did an editor's note. And the editor's note was not on the new piece of reporting to say, hey, oops, yes, she was charged with like authority over the border, or certainly Biden had a whole big song and a dance about how she was going to be in charge of the border. They corrected the original reporting and said that she was never a border czar. This is just the culture now is like separate from even the medium. And I think, the culture has followed the medium. It's this ephemeral sort of anything goes. We just shape things based on our whims. I think Trump was early to sort of understanding this. That's certainly his political style, and everyone does it now, and it is super maddening, and it's a kind of gaslighting constantly every day, and it makes you feel like you're going crazy, which is maybe why so many people clock out. But as you mentioned, Sanjana, it is interesting that the memories cannot be formed. They can't even be held. You're right. Like the assassination, that was a week ago, the attempted assassination. It's like, it's not a thing that people talk about.
Yeah. I mean, to get into some of the specifics on exactly what happened, and I'm reading from Brandon's notes, so forgive me if there's, any issues in this, but basically it seems like this all came down to one software update that CrowdStrike pushed, which affected around 8.5 million Windows-based computers to crash. They were all showing this like blue screen of death, apparently. And, CrowdStrike is this massive cybersecurity company that has something close to 30,000 customers worldwide. And it was this one software update. And I guess one of the reasons why it was so hard to fix is that it required someone physically sort of, enter some information into the computer and reboot it and all this stuff. So this all had to be done kind of manually. And there's an interesting component to this story where Microsoft's chief communications officer came out and kind of suggested that, obviously the immediate cause of this was the software, the sort of buggy software update from Crowdstrike. But he suggested that the reason, the sort of second order reason, was because of EU regulation from 2009, which I guess had required that Microsoft give CrowdStrike, or maybe sort of like broadly third-party cybersecurity that it worked with, kernel access over its software. And kernel access, I guess, basically means that the software has the same access to, or the third party has the same access to the software as Microsoft does. And so this somehow explains how, this one software update, buggy software update from a third party had such an extensive catastrophic effect on Windows systems. And so it's a kind of interesting little caveat here.
Yeah, another reason to be mad at the EU for regulating something that it shouldn't be regulating. That it didn't build.
Yeah.
You know what? So CrowdStrike, I mean, what is left to talk about this other than it was a disaster? People forgot about it. Riley, where were you in the great air blackout of 2024?
So I was flying back from LA this weekend. First flight was canceled. Second flight delayed so much I almost missed my connection. And I just remember thinking to myself, air travel did not used to always be like this. Things used to work in this country. And yeah, I agree. It's just been a general stagnation that has permeated through so much of society, specifically our infrastructure. And if I was almost stranded in LAX because of the EU, there's something deeply wrong with that. That hurts me to my core.
Yo, Europe's awesome, but Brussels sucks. I want to, Sanjana, tell me you've been working on a piece kind of breaking down all the various ways they've been fucking with us. I would love you to just kind of trace through that a little bit. And then I want to talk a little bit, just for a moment, cap this episode off on some of the reaction that we're seeing from tech.
Yeah, I mean, we have a piece out, I think it's coming out today, hopefully, on basically how EU vampire regulators have been sucking the blood of American big tech companies for about a decade now, and I guess longer indirectly. But basically, Europe has a number of regulations related to, data privacy and competition that in some cases seem to explicitly target big American tech companies and kind of if not be designed to, their kind of overall effect is to basically siphon massive amounts of money, billions of euros from these companies for non-compliance. So the one that most people are familiar with is GDPR, which is this general data protection regulation that was passed in 2016. 84% of the amount of fines has been levied at American companies. So they've levied thousands of fines, but American companies have paid 84% of them because America has the biggest tech companies in the world. So America's paid at this point around 3.8 billion euros in fines, of which Meta alone has paid over 2 billion in a couple of fines. And so this is money that basically, it's a little bit complicated to figure out exactly where it goes, but in many cases it seems to go back to the country that fined the company. So Ireland hit Meta with an over €1 billion fine, and it looks like some of that money probably went to Irish healthcare or whatever. So they have that, GDPR. But what's really pretty scary is their new regulations, the Digital Market and Digital Services Act, which have just come into effect. They were passed, I think, in 2022 or 23. But the compliance deadline was in March. And these explicitly seem to target American companies. So the DMA, Digital Markets Act, is this anti-competition, targeting brands that they think are anti-competitive. So it targets 6 companies, all but one is American. So ByteDance is the only non-American. The rest, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Meta. are American. And then the Digital Services Act targets very large online platforms, or VLOPs, which seems to be an EU neologism that they've come up with, mainly American companies, some Chinese companies in there. But these new regulations allow them to impose fines of up to 10% of a company's global annual turnover. So that's the DMA. The DSA is up to 6%. But the EU has already begun weaponizing this. So their compliance deadline was in March. This sort of vast new set of regulations that companies have to scramble and hire lawyers to get into compliance with. And then in June, they announced that Apple could be fined up to $38 billion, which is around 20% of its net annual income, it looks like, unless they adapt to the new regulations. And similarly threatened Meta a few days ago, I think, with a fine. And now, of course, the thing that brought a lot of this to our attention was the EU commissioner, what is Terry Breton or whatever.
Oh yeah,
saying that,
the guy with the weird face, the frog looking face.
Yeah, saying, we're going to slap daily fines on X because their new sort of policies around blue checks for premium users violates the DSA. So they're threatening daily fines of X. So that's kind of where we're at in the landscape. Yeah.
You've seen some other, so separate from that, now there are a handful of African countries that have jumped in as well. And they're like, we're going to sue you too. And we want money. We're fining you. Send us $200 million to Meta. Recently got one. I think, listen, to the question of why they're doing this, it's clearly they just want money. And that's, I think, certainly where it started. To do that, they have to justify it with things like, oh, these companies are anti-competitive. They're anti-private competitive with who? First of all, Europe doesn't build tech companies. So who are they who has an unfair advantage in Europe? Like, show me the company, and then we can have a conversation about that. But I think they, somewhere along the lines, have come to believe some of the shit they're saying, which is why they're not backing down. But the interesting turn that we're finally seeing, since God knows our own government is not fighting back on behalf of our companies, which are being clearly targeted unfairly by Europe. These are it's easy trade policy for me, is to retaliate back, to strike back, to say, no, we need a fair, balanced kind of set of rules here. Our government will never do it. I think maybe Trump would do something like this if it gets just in his gum, if it sticks in his craw. Certainly Biden wouldn't. I mean, he's trying to, his Lena Khan is trying to dismantle our companies herself. They don't care about our industry. But you've seen tech doing a little bit more. So two things came up recently that I thought were interesting. One is more broad, in that it's a little more global. And we've talked about it a little bit before, which is the media stuff. So you see these efforts in places like Australia, Canada, the UK, I believe, and certainly Europe more generally is talking about this. California tried, but I don't think that's going to happen. To force Meta to pay publishers per click, local news publishers and things like this. Meta's response, which is, I mean, it's crazy, right? It's like it's traffic for you, first of all, and it's like a gift. You're welcome. They're like, no, you have to pay us because you're robbing our content creators or whatever. Meanwhile, it's like the most popular shit online is just dumb people saying things for free. It's random influencers. It's not I don't know, what is a funny, the Timbuktu Chronicle or something. It's Meta's just shutting off. Mark's like, no, I'm just not doing news links anymore. So he shut them off in places like Canada and Europe. And of course they blame that. They're like, that's the reason that we don't know that there's like a forest fire happening or something. It's irrelevant. Mark doesn't care. He's playing hardball, which I love to see. He's got that like sick gold chain. He's got the excellent hair now. If he could grow a beard, I think he would. That would look great. I hope he can. He should look into a transplant or something. That's the next step for him for sure. But he's fighting back. He did it in another way recently that was, I think, even more important. One of the weird EU rules targeted AI. Famously, Frog Guy said, we were the first. It was, I think it's still pinned, his tweet that said it was a pie chart, and it's all of the blue is the EU, and then yellow is like every other country in the world. And the meme was just countries that have successfully passed AI regulation. And it was a huge blue circle for the EU. And he was super proud of this, coming from the continent where there are no relevant AI companies. People keep talking about this one in France. We'll see. Mistral, I believe. He passed this regulation that makes it really, really difficult for Meta's new model to operate abroad. And what do? They just don't ship it to Europe rather than deal with the regulation. And so now you're starting to see these companies fight back on their own and box themselves out of Europe. I think that if they don't back down on the regulation, this has to happen more broadly. Every company is going to have to do this. They're not going to be able to operate there. There's no way Apple is just going to send, it seems really shocking to me that Apple would just send $30 billion to Brussels. And it's not tenable if they do it. And obviously, this is why the African countries are following suit. They're like, fuck, there's just free money on the table. Why wouldn't, if big tech's just going to hand us a paycheck for crying about something publicly and saying, I don't know, you're like stealing our data or something, we're doing that. And it's sort of irrational. If you're a foreign country and you don't have any tech industry at all to speak of, why not try and get a little paycheck from these guys? They've got to say no. And once they say no, we'll see what happens in the countryside. Like, does the EU just shut all these companies out and plummet its continent to the dark ages? Because God knows they're not going to be building any companies of their own. Or do they end up just letting Chinese companies in, after they burn the bridge with the US, which would be really worst case scenario for them. I understand the impulse to want your own companies, but they just don't build them. So why are they doing this? It's a game of chicken. Where do you think it ends? Do you think they back down? Do you think big tech backs down?
I think there's probably a middle ground. I mean, Meta's not releasing its new model in the EU yet, and Apple's not releasing its Apple Intelligence in the EU either. And I think my sense is the regulators have gotten so used to just saying, okay, comply with this insane, convoluted list of regulations. And they've just, for so long, assumed that these companies are going to hire the lawyers and then implement the changes that are often very costly and comply. And now if they see that companies are just going to pull out, I would think that they would have to moderate their stance, because I don't think it would be ideal either for companies like Meta or Apple to lose the European market, which is, a pretty big market of people. But I thought you, Solana, had an interesting take on Twitter about, I don't know if this was related to the Nigeria fining X, but that it is interesting to think that we've lived in this time of where everyone's kind of had access to the internet globally, and that we've all shared this kind of increasingly insane, untenable global town square with each other. And I do wonder if that paradigm is coming to an end, and sort of see parallels to what you were talking about with Jack Dorsey a few months ago about kind of decentralized social media platforms. I do wonder if we're entering a time where the tech you have access to, even online in the US looks a lot different than what you have access to in Europe and China.
I think that with these serious fines on the table, to the point where it would impact the businesses dramatically, they have to say no. And then it comes down to what the other countries will do. I think there is something in a country's interest to have, its own industry, its own tech industry. The question is if they can build it or not. I don't know. They can't be that stupid. I'm sure they can build a social media company. Someone can over there. Will they work at it? Do they want to work? We'll see. But yeah, I think the decentralization is the future of these things, at least into big markets. I see there being, a probably North-South American, like all of North and South America maybe share a market. I think Africa backs down and probably is a part of that market, and then dips maybe into, if it wants to, I think the Europeans maybe get their own market. Certainly China already has its own market. And that's the other question is are you in China's market? Are you in the American market? But I do think the open internet is kind of unfortunately over. And it was chaotic and crazy and wondrous and horrifying and exciting and not normal and not tenable. And like everything else in our country, kind of maps to the nationalist, globalist conversation. And the increasing, what appears to be increasingly the fragmentation of the globalist order. You see it in the internet as well. And that medium tends to shape our reality. So I think that's the future. I don't think it'll be like every country has its own internet. I think there'll be, a handful of big competing markets with weird overlap in some places. But I just don't see another way. The only way that you stop that is if the EU really just backs off of the regulation. And at this point, I don't know that they can. All they have are regulators. This is what they do, and it seems somehow too damaging to them to lose this fight. So my sense is that if neither side can lose, I think both sides will actually lose.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe we need something just last. Can we have one less gloomy thought? Is there anything positive going on right now?
Gavin Newsom says he wants to clear the homeless encampments in California.
Fucking go.
Yeah.
Get him out of here.
Gavin, so we'll see. But
he's going to clear the tents. So this is the California law that allows him to, and now he's going to expect everybody to clear them. And
yeah, well, so this is coming on the heels of the Supreme Court ruling. So Grants Pass versus Johnson, where the Supreme Court scrapped this made up ACLU sort of driven, quote unquote, right to public camping, which was always on shaky legal ground, but has now been definitively killed by the Supreme Court. And Gavin has said, you got to clear the tents. He tweeted something like "Time's up," but it's not. He can't, force them to clear encampments. This is something that's handled at the local level. And then there's this question of where do people go? And California has 150,000 unsheltered homeless people, I think, at this point. And so you have to give all these people presumably shelter, and that's incredibly costly.
A bus ticket home.
That is what I think is probably the best option, but that's not what they're doing. They're trying to put people in shelter and that kind of thing. So,
a little bit of progress on the insane California front. I guess Gavin looking ahead for 2028.
Yeah.
Provided Kamala doesn't succeed, which she might. The coconut season feels evocative, powerful. But is it perhaps just a coconut mirage? Wait and see. We'll talk to you guys next week. It's been real. Later.